Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really big topic, one with huge implications: the fashion industry's push towards sustainability. Or maybe its attempt at it.
Right.
You're here because you want to get past the headlines, understand what's really happening, and that's what we aim to do, a focused look at how clothes are made, used, and, well, what happens next.
Exactly. We're basing this on a recent Citi GPS report, Fashion Forward, towards a circular value chain. It's our guide for today,
Okay.
packed with data, consumer surveys, regulation info, all that stuff. The goal is to see the real progress, the, hurdles still there, and this idea of the circular fashion economy.
Okay, so this report, it talks about what's driving this shift towards sustainability. What are the main forces?
Well, number one, it's really the consumer,
Yep.
especially younger people, and those with more money to spend. They're asking more questions.
Voting with their wallets.
Pretty much. They want to know the impact of their clothes. The report even mentions an Altheian survey. Affluent consumers, particularly women, actually see buying secondhand luxury as a positive environmental move.
That's interesting. Secondhand luxury.
Yeah, over 40% would think about buying pre-owned or even renting. That's a pretty big shift, even for high-end fashion.
It really is a change in perception, isn't it? But it's not just shoppers pushing this, right? You mentioned regulations. Governments are getting
Oh,
involved.
absolutely. Regulation is becoming a huge driver, especially in Europe.
Okay.
You've got the EU's CSDD, that's the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. It basically forces companies to be accountable for human rights and environmental impacts, like across their entire supply chain,
Wow, the whole thing.
the whole thing. And it'll be public info. Think radical transparency. Then there's the ESPR Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. That includes something called the Digital Product Passport.
Digital product passport. What's that? Like,
Imagine a nutrition label, but for your T-shirt or jeans. Tells you the environmental footprint, maybe social impact. That's the idea, giving you, the consumer, that info.
okay, that could be powerful. And what about here in the U.S.? Is anything similar happening?
There's definitely some movement. The report points to the proposed Fabric Act. That one's focused more on garment worker wages and also, interestingly, incentives for bringing manufacturing back to the U.S.
Reshoring. Okay.
And then there's the New York Fashion Act, also proposed. That would require broader reporting on environmental and social stuff for fashion companies operating in New York. So the pressure is building stateside too, even if it's not law yet.
So consumers pushing, regulators pushing. Is the industry itself setting, like, concrete goals? Or is it still kind of vague?
Well, there's data on that. The Global Fashion Agenda Monitor found a good chunk of the industry has set specific targets.
Oh, really? Like what?
Like 67% have goals for water usage, and 42% have targets for cutting greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so numbers exist.
Right. And the UNEP, the UN Environment Program, they've summarized industry aims too. It falls into categories like shifting consumption patterns, needing new infrastructure, and just, better practices overall.
All right, so targets are on paper, but the big question, I guess, is, are they actually doing anything? Are we seeing real changes happening?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Citi report does suggest some action behind the talk. One interesting trend is actually reshoring, bringing some production back to the U.S.
We mentioned the Fabric Act potentially encouraging that.
Exactly. And it's not just about, patriotism or whatever. Bringing manufacturing closer can cut transport emissions, maybe allow for better oversight on labor standards.
Makes sense. And the materials themselves. Are brands actually using more sustainable fabrics and stuff?
The signs point that way. The report says there's a clear increase in brand sourcing from manufacturers who specialize in ecological materials. There's this EU taxonomy thing. Basically, a classification system for green activities and data from that shows over half the revenue for suppliers to retailers is now linked to sustainability in some way.
50%. That sounds significant.
It suggests a real shift in sourcing decisions, yeah.
And following the money. Does the report show any interesting payment flows? Like where the money's going?
It does, yeah. Some interesting patterns. For instance, activewear brands seem to be using more tech services from Canada.
Canada.
Yeah. And while reshoring to the U.S. is a theme, manufacturing in Asia, especially Thailand, is still really important.
Still a major hub.
Definitely. And then you see U.S. luxury brands using more professional services from the U.K., while French luxury giants seem to be strengthening ties with suppliers in China. It's a complex web.
It really sounds like it. Lots of moving parts. And the report mentioned ESG leaders. Companies really focused on environmental, social governance stuff.
Yes. those leading companies in fashion. Most have committed to net zero emissions by 2050. Some even have tougher goals for 2030.
So high-level commitment is there from the leaders.
It demonstrates they recognize the climate urgency, at least at that top level.
Okay, so there's progress, targets, some sourcing shifts, commitments. But I get the feeling the report also points out some major gaps. Where is the industry falling short?
Exactly. Despite setting targets, action seems to be lagging in really crucial areas, like water stewardship and biodiversity.
Water, that always comes up with fashion, doesn't it?
It's huge. The industry's value chain is heavily concentrated in areas already facing serious water stress. This isn't just bad for the environment, it's a massive financial risk for the businesses themselves.
Oh, risk how?
Relying on a resource that's becoming scarce. The projections are pretty alarming. By 2050, something like 75% of apparel and textile sites could be facing high or even extreme water risks.
75%. Wow, that's stark. And biodiversity. What's the issue there?
It's maybe less obvious than water, but the report notes some suppliers are operating really close to key biodiversity hotspots. Yeah. That closeness raises big concerns about potential damage to these really important, fragile ecosystems.
It definitely sounds like just tweaking the current system, the sort of take, make, dispose model, probably isn't going to cut it for these big issues like water and biodiversity.
That's the argument the report makes. Incremental change is good, but maybe not enough.
Which leads us to this idea of a circular fashion economy, right? What's the core principle?
Right. Instead of just trying to pollute less or use less water within the old linear model, circularity aims for a totally different system, a closed loop.
Closed loop.
Meaning designing clothes right from the start so they last longer, so they can be easily repaired, so they can be resold or rented out, and then at the very end they can be properly recycled back into new materials. The materials chosen are absolutely fundamental to making that work.
And we are starting to see brands dip their toes into this. Any examples stand out?
We are, yeah. Some well-known ones. Patagonia's Worn Wear program is a classic example. They resell and repair their own gear.
Right, I've seen that.
Levi's has its tailor shops for repairs. Beyond just brands, there's innovation happening in developing new fabrics that are either made from recycled stuff or designed specifically to be recycled later.
But I sense a but coming. The report suggests these circular efforts are still pretty small scale overall.
That's the crucial reality check. Yeah. Right now, these circular business models, they only make up about 3.5% of the global fashion market.
Only 3.5%? That's tiny.
It is. And despite all the sustainability talk, the actual production of new virgin fibers, it keeps going up.
So we're making more new stuff, even while talking about circularity.
Exactly. The old reduce, reuse, recycle idea is getting updated with things like repair and rent. But even rental isn't straightforward. There's this thing called the rebound effect.
Rebound effect?
Yeah, the idea that if renting is super easy and cheap, maybe people end up consuming more items overall, even if they don't own them, offsetting the benefit.
Huh. An unintended consequence. And it feels like the industry hasn't quite put its money where its mouth is on circularity yet.
The report definitely suggests that. Lots of companies sign net zero pledges, which is good, but formal track targets specifically for circularity. Much less common across the board. And actually, the data shows a worrying trend. Clothes are being worn fewer times now before being thrown out compared to about, say, 15 years ago.
Fewer times, wow.
Yeah. And the money coming from these circular models, resale, rental, etc., it's still just a tiny fraction of total revenue. Big gap between the talk and the business reality.
Okay, let's talk materials then, because that seems key to making circularity work. What's happening with sustainable materials and manufacturing innovation?
Well, there's exciting stuff happening. Definitely innovation in circular fabrics and new materials from recycled sources or materials engineered so they can be easily recycled down the line.
Like designed for recycling.
Exactly. The report looked at patent data, actually. Saw a big jump in filings with keywords like sustainable, eco-friendly materials.
Yeah.
And it seems like activewear and luxury brands are kind of leading the charge there.
Okay, so innovation is happening in the labs, in the patents. Is it actually getting into the clothes we buy? Is it scaling up?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
The report calls it the uptake gap.
Uptake gap.
Yeah. Despite the cool new sustainable materials being developed, overall production of virgin fibers just keeps climbing. Like, recycled polyester production has grown, sure, but virgin polyester production has grown even faster. So the proportion of recycled polyester has actually gone down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's a real need to make these sustainable options cheaper, more competitive, and just get them adopted much more widely.
And circular manufacturing. It's not just about the fabric itself, is it? It's broader than that.
Well, much broader. It has to be. It touches everything. How factories are powered shifting to renewables, how much water they use, drastic reductions, recycling water, how raw materials are grown, getting rid of fossil fuel-based fertilizers and pesticides for things like cotton.
Right. The whole process.
Exactly, closing the loop at every single stage, not just dealing with the garment at the end of its life.
This all sounds environmentally beneficial, potentially, but what about the people, the workers in the fashion industry? What does a shift to circularity mean for them, the social side?
That's a really big question and honestly an area with a lot of uncertainty. The report flags this requires careful thought.
Okay.
In theory, a circular economy could mean more local jobs, maybe fairer systems. But there are real potential downsides too.
Like what?
Well, if the goal is fewer, longer-lasting clothes, what happens to all the jobs in traditional garment factories?
Yeah.
Especially in countries that rely heavily on that manufacturing, there's a real risk of job losses there. Figure 21 in the report kind of illustrates that potential shift.
But wouldn't new jobs pop up in repair or resale or recycling?
Yes, definitely potential for new jobs in those areas.
Mm.
Garment repair, textile sorting for recycling.
Yeah.
But these jobs often need different skills than sewing in a factory.
True.
And there's a real concern about the quality of these new jobs. Will the pay be as good? What about working conditions, benefits? Research from India, Europe, the US, it suggests the new jobs might not always be equivalent or better.
And the report mentioned the informal sector, too, people already involved in recycling.
Yes, that's critical. Take recycled polyester. Its production often relies heavily on informal waste pickers collecting plastic bottles.
Right.
These workers often face really tough, sometimes dangerous conditions. Low pay, no safety net, child labor can be an issue too. It just highlights that we absolutely have to design the circular transition with social justice baked in from the start. It needs to be fair for everyone involved.
That's a crucial point. So, given all these complexities, the environmental needs, the social questions, the business realities, what are the key things the industry needs to do to actually move forward?
The report boils it down to two main action areas. First, optimize how resources are used right now.
Optimize consumption. How?
Things like investing in energy-efficient machines in factories, putting in systems to recycle wastewater, prioritizing materials that have a lower impact to begin with, finding ways to use the fabric scraps, the offcuts, instead of just binning them.
Okay, efficiency gains.
Exactly. And a huge part of this is shifting energy sources, getting factories off fossil fuels and onto renewables. That takes big investment, obviously,
Right, needs capital.
which is where sustainable finance comes in. The report mentions things like the IFC and EBIG group partnering on green loans for factories. And collaboration is key, too. Brands working closely with suppliers, like Gap Inc.'s Sustainable Supply Chain Finance Program, helping suppliers make these investments.
Okay, so optimize resource use. What's the second big action area?
So the second one is really scaling up those circular business models we talked about.
Making them more than 3.5% of the market.
Precisely. Actively creating revenue from sharing, from reuse, educating consumers, helping us all understand how to participate. Designing clothes for durability and style that lasts, not just fast trends.
And the recycling part.
And investing seriously in the infrastructure needed to collect, sort, and actually recycle textiles effectively at scale. Setting real targets for revenue from these circular streams, like the UNEP suggests, could really drive change.
It sounds like this massive shift also creates different kinds of opportunities for investors, maybe, those looking at sustainability.
Oh, absolutely. The report touches on several ways investors can play a role. They can back established brands that are genuinely committing to sustainability and circularity,
Invest in the leaders.
or support the new players. Innovative brands built around circular principles from day one, designing for longevity, resale, recycling built in.
Makes sense. What about public markets?
In public equity, you could invest in companies scaling up sustainable technologies, or use shareholder votes, proxy voting, to push for stronger ESG action from brands. For fixed income, things like green bonds or sustainability-linked bonds can fund projects.
Though you mentioned being careful there.
Yeah, need to watch out for greenwashing or that rebound effect, making the impact less positive than it looks on paper. And then there's private equity, venture capital.
Investing in the newer tech.
Exactly. Areas like virtual sampling to reduce physical prototypes,
Yeah.
bio-based fibers, those re-commerce platforms for resale. Lots of innovation happening there, but obviously comes with the usual risks of early-stage investing.
This has been incredibly thorough, a real deep dive into a complex world. If we were to boil it down, what are the main takeaways from this Citi GPS report and our chat?
I think the big picture is Yes, the fashion industry is moving on sustainability, consumer demand, regulations, they're pushing it forward, there's real action happening.
But
But achieving a truly circular system is a massive undertaking. Huge challenges remain, especially around water use. And crucially, figuring out the social side, making sure the transition is fair for workers.
so incremental changes aren't quite enough.
They help, but the report suggests a more fundamental redesign of the whole system is probably needed to hit those ambitious goals the industry has set.
And for you, listening in, we hope this deep dive has given you a clearer picture of where sustainable fashion stands today and where it might be headed. You're hopefully better equipped now to understand the forces shaping this huge industry.
And maybe we can leave you with a final thought. Really consider that link between environmental sustainability and social equity in fashion's future. They're deeply intertwined.
Yeah. What role can you as a consumer play in pushing for a system that's not just circular, but also just and fair for everyone involved?
Yeah.
Something to think about. We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these issues.